But over that time, what's been really valued are things like content. And when I say content, I'm talking education and support for client conversation.
What I see with people I talk to and engage with, like other advisors, is it's like, oh, AI is going to help solve every problem of life. And I talk to a lot of people who go, where does automation stop and AI begin? Really, AI is a fancy term, but if we can get a machine to do if this, then that, and it does it well, that's what AI needs to be doing anyway. And we really want to combine AI to only do that.
Simplistically, one of the things I'm just trying to do is trying to help take away the crap so there's more personal time. And if you're taking away a lot of that process and the things that are unnecessary, that means that an advisor can see more people. That means more people get looked after.
Hey there, I'm Phil Thompson from the My Risk Advisor podcast. Today with me, I'm interviewing my good friend, Marc Fabris, who is a digital consultant and founder. Thanks for coming on, Marc.
Right, thanks for having me along for a chat, Phil. Looking forward to it.
So let's start off. You've been around for a while. You must have started in the industry when you were 2. So give me a journey of your career journey to date. What have you done?
Yeah, so I have been around it a while, and for the vast majority of it, it's been around risk. And so early in the piece, I say it's way back when it was easy to be an advisor. Spent a bit of time advising. Then I spent a fair while through the corporate world in product management, marketing, working my way around the traps, and a fair bit of sort of the looking after research, relationships. And that kind of shifted into more of digital and digital strategy. And I found myself for a few years in that role over actually in Europe. While I was with Zurich, which was lovely, sent me out of the country for a few years, and that was a wonderful experience. And then came back and spent a few more years in the corporate world before finding myself into self-employment, which I hadn't been for quite some time.
Yeah, cool. So looking back, was there a particular moment or any reason why you were attracted to risk advice or risk products in the corporate space, or is it you just kind of fell into it?
Yeah, I probably kind of fell into it originally from the advice perspective. I'd tried a little advising that was, it was way back when you didn't really have so much in the holistic advice. It was really insurance and super. And
did you do the customer advice records? I wasn't around.
It was even before that, but yeah,
even before that.
It was before. It was before that.
How good.
It was before commissions, but I found myself back. It was actually in the days when National Mutual was still a thing, and so I kind of kicked off. I knew someone that was in the advice space. I'd met, and they were like, "Give it a go." I was fairly young at the time, and it was a challenge having those conversations. I think when you are not as experienced in the world as you might like, and you're having, grown-up conversations around the dinner table with families around, their needs. But terrific experience, and the training was brilliant, and just sort of in the deep end straight off. And then just moved through, I think, as the world became more multi-agent and broker, I moved into that side of things, which I quite enjoyed. Spent a bit of time before I decided to give the corporate world a crack.
Yeah, I think about we have quite a few associates in our business, and thinking about their training and development plan and their technical expertise that they've got to go through and the soft skills that they've got to learn, and all the compliance. Every meeting's recorded, so we've got to make sure they've got a technical expertise where we aren't doing anything, at making a mistake that's, that we can be caught in an AFCA case in the future. You think about back in the day, those conversations of setting up those policies.
Yeah.
Obviously you're working in the client's best interest and you're doing what's right for the client, but there was no kind of guardrails to make sure that, does this young kid know what they're doing? Probably not.
You're right. It was all a sales process, but it was all about you doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. And I think that part of that, learning the sales process, and I had really good people around me, and just appreciating empathy and getting through to people. And that is something that's missing a fair bit, today. It's become so technical, so compliant driven. A lot of that kind of conversational learning and expertise, it's hard. And so that's where it's good, like in your practice, where you've got people that are sharing and learning along the way with each other. I think that's wonderful. Because you do need that. It can be hard in this environment where you're so siloed and you're trying to learn and understand.
That's right. And, we could go down a rabbit hole talking about soft skills and soft skills development. I love talking about that stuff. But I know we are talking to you about like innovation. We're going to talk about what you're doing in that space. So before we touch on kind of what you're doing now, I'd love to know from your experience abroad, is there any kind of learnings that you took from that experience, or even just in a big corporate, learnings about innovation in the risk space?
First of all, there's plenty of opportunity for it because this market feels like it's been so far behind so many other industries with just engagement with consumers and clients, with admin, with systems, with tools. It's been so far behind. So I think I've found it not too hard in the corporate world to kind of get a bit ahead with innovation because just simply wasn't that hard. It's not that hard to be good. Unfortunately, though, it's we've seen a continuous period of focus on compliance regulation and a lack of just really setting time aside, and whether this is individuals or corporate priority, to just say, what are we doing about innovation? Are we getting into a lab? Are we actually just focused on this? Are we putting some particular priority on it? And it just doesn't happen enough, I think. So I guess, first of all, is actually to have it as a priority and make time for it, because it's one of those things. It's like running a business. Do you spend just time on the business, in the business? And you've got to find balance. And whether you're corporate or working for yourself, the same thing applies.
Now, I'd love to talk about kind of what you're doing at the moment. So you've gone from, early days as a young fella sitting around the dinner table with some, young families selling life insurance, into corporate, now moving into, consulting, and you've kind of developed websites, the Risk Hub, and then more recently Life Insurance Guide. So talk to me about, why you've developed these websites. What are they for? What do they do? What's the purpose?
I guess through my corporate life, what I've tried to do is leverage my learnings, background, understanding, appreciation of kind of the whole value chain. And a lot of the focus had been around advisor and advice practice delivery, anything from portals to tools, quote software and those sorts of things. So I've had a focus for quite some time on trying to make things easier from a corporate perspective for practices. And so then I've kind of moved my way into working for myself. Yeah, I've been doing a fair bit of practice and individual consulting, but what I've wanted to do was enable a little more of one-to-many capabilities. And so that's what kind of Risk Hub started from, is to say, how can I help more practices with less sort of either face time or less resource? And so originally Risk Hub came from that, providing education, providing tools, basics like links to insurers and resources, because everyone's experience that they provide is different. So the idea in principle was to go, let's provide a service that helps save time for practices, make life a bit easier. And that's kind of become like a mechanism, I guess, or a delivery capability to then do more. And so, some of it's been education, like anything from a bit of CPD, and also helping to connect providers, whether that's training providers or insurers or service providers, just being a little bit of a facility in some ways, a middleman to help practices to find what they need. In some cases, providing it directly. In others, providing those solutions and doing things like having showcase days that I've had of showcasing service providers, because it's not always easy to know who's around that can help you with different challenges.
Cool. All right. So that's kind of the purpose of it. So talk to me, like, for any of the advisors out there listening, what are the kind of, like, give me some of the top three kind of takeaways or benefits that they'll see from either the Risk Hub or Life Insurance Guide?
As I say, it kind of kicked off as this resource center. And one of the things that's developed, and it hasn't been that long, I guess, it's only been 2.5 years, so it's not a terribly long period of time. But over that time, what's been really valued are things like content. And I spent a lot of time focusing on that last year. And when I say content, I'm talking education and support for client conversations. And one of the things that was incredibly popular last year was, simple as it is, an ebook for life insurance. And you go, well, surely there's heaps out there, but actually there isn't. And so that was, it was something fairly simple to do. But what I did was say, oh, here's a tool for something you can use for client conversations. Instead of you having to go do it yourself, you can go pop your brand on it. And so that gives a little bit of commercial value back to me to have an option to go, well, here's a branded tool, doesn't cost you much, put it on your website, use it to support your client conversations. Not just clients though, referral sources. Because one of the things we see are inconsistent and probably lacking content for ongoing center of influence conversations, keeping front of mind. So a lot of what I did last year was around that. How do I help that education and content support for practices for their consumers? And you do a lot, so you know a lot around that, and you do it actively, videos and material and content. But on the whole, the market does it really poorly. And so it's about trying to help do more. So then Life Insurance Guide was kind of the next natural step. And so what that provides is it's an end consumer focused site, not an advisor focused site, but end consumer education, but supporting advice. So then you can go as a practice, well, here's a way I can leverage content that's third party, that is easy to read, natural, does follow a pathway of learning and education, but I'd be happy to share it. I'd be happy to share content, happy to point people to it. And part of that then is to help advisors promote. And so then there's a directory to say, well, we also want to be able to connect consumers to those that are focused on life insurance. And we know there aren't many. So instead of going and finding some education and then wondering where the hell to go for an advisor, a key part of Life Insurance Guide is to build out that resource and the source of advisors and practices who you do know are focused on life insurance advice. So they're not going to just turn you away when you're looking for help.
So building these two websites, experimenting in kind of what's working, what's not. You're getting feedback from end consumers, but predominantly advisors are giving you feedback.
Yeah.
What are some of the most surprising bits of feedback that you've received, good or bad?
What was probably one of the most surprising things last year was I did a one-page trauma flyer, and I just had people screaming about how bloody good it was. And I'm like, it's not necessarily that hard, but the thing is, you rely on what is kind of around, and you don't have the time as a standard practice to go developing marketing and communication materials all the time. You want to lean on what's out. And what happens is you get material from insurers that is rarely sufficiently independent. And so you go, oh, that's not quite doing what I want to do, or it's too technical. It just doesn't do the job. So to come out with something that you go, well, this supports a client conversation on trauma, but it's agnostic to insurers, it's agnostic to advice, but it supports advice. It's like, oh, this is great. I can then go put my brand on it, rock and roll. Really easy, costs me very little, and I've got some tools. And so that has sort of really spurred me on to do more in that space. So I've continued on that pathway. I mean, there's a number of innovation pathways. The content and collateral is a big one. There's also the tools and resources, but this all comes from that feedback. Each year I'm doing an advisor tech or risk tech survey that helps understand where the pain points are. And I then directly respond to that. So I can't do everything, but it's like, well, if there's some help needed, then what I want to do with the community I'm working with is to try and help find the resources or develop tools. And I've got a number of those in progress to try and help.
And that's such an interesting point. You said the content's not hard for you to create. It's not hard for an advisor to create. But guess what? We're not doing it. So being able to leverage your own time and go, hey, as an advisor, my core focus is sitting in front of clients. That's how I get paid. Now, using this, outsourcing some of that work to build a flyer to help educate my clients around trauma, there's heaps of benefits. The benefit is, you scale your time, number one. Next benefit is you get to meet your ethics obligations. Now, I know people get funky about, talking about the code of ethics, but code of ethics is incredibly important. It's a legal obligation whereby we can feel comfortable as advisors that the clients understand our advice, because I was talking about this the other day. It's standard 5, just in case you want to hear me brag about my knowledge of the ethics guides. But standard 5 talks about that. We're going to act in our best interest, but we also have an obligation to make sure that our clients understand our advice. So utilizing these kind of flyers and leveraging our time to go, hey, as a part of our advice, if we're recommending trauma, we're going to have, provide you this guide. And so I can feel comfortable that our clients understand this is super important.
Yeah.
And so let's kind of move towards innovation in advice, what that looks like. I love talking about technology and what it can do and dream up things. But before we talk about some of that stuff, I'd love to hear, where do you see the risk advice sector over the next 5 years? And then the follow-on question is, what part of that development do you play?
I think there is so much more we can do to help with efficiency in delivery, first of all. And that's I guess, a given. It's not going to surprise anyone. I think there is absolutely a continued place for personal help and support. And so simplistically, one of the things I'm just trying to do and to help, which you can break down into a lot of small pieces, is trying to help take away the crap so there's more personal time. And if you're taking away a lot of that process and the things that are unnecessary, that means that an advisor can see more people. That means more people get looked after. And the fact is, we know that the market is well underdone. We know that we've got half the business that was being written 5 or 6 years ago being written at the moment. And a lot of that's business that's moving around. So clearly there are people that are underserved, underserviced. So at the very least, if we can go and help practices, help advisors to be able to see more people, then that's a benefit. You might say, well, a lot of people don't really want to see someone personally. I think they do. I think they still do. I think people still want to be able to research. They still want to learn. They still want support. So I think what we need to do is a better job at augmenting advice, with that education, with that support. As I say, taking more of the crap out. And what's kind of great is the availability of tools and tech that we've got, which is so much easier to use and available than it was just a few years ago. I mean, whether that's working in a small business or big, I worked in corporate world for a long time, and the sort of money that it was costing for programs was massive. And yes, it's still big, but the ability to pilot and to prototype and do stuff nowadays is so much better. So I'm slightly off track there, but the point is we've got more capacity to help deliver. I think there's still a big need for that interpersonal side of things. But what we don't do well is provide good client journeys that can be delivered with flexibility along the complete journey. And that's what is a shame. And I've thought that's been an issue for many years, because you've kind of got a direct pathway. You've got an advised pathway. You've got group insurance delivery through super funds, and it's like never the twain shall meet. But why shouldn't it be the case that you've got this interoperability of service delivery? And you've got a client that says, hey, I want to do some research. I want to understand this stuff. But then it's like, oh my God, these forms, this process, this underwriting, I need some help. And so to be able to weave elements of advice support or self-directed fulfillment, I think that's where we need to be, where we need to go. And I think that's wonderful if we can.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to pin you down on some specific things of where you see us in 5 years' time, because I'm interested to understand kind of your vision, because you've been around, risk and advice for a long time. And so I think your kind of vision of the future is an interesting take. So, talk to me about the level of business written. We're at $300 million of business written. In 5 years' time, what do you think we're at?
I'd like to think in 5 years that's tripled. And
tripled?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that's. I think it shouldn't be too hard to get back to where we were. I think there's absolutely should be a growing market.
Tripled in 5 years. Oh, okay, that is ambitious. I love it. I'd love to be a part of that as well.
I mean, you wouldn't be unhappy if it was doubled, but I think just to get back to where we were. And you might say, well, even if you've got incredible efficiency, you've got a lot more advisors in play, it's not easy to get back to that. But the fact that we've got, give or take, and I know these numbers are publicly available all over the show. We've got some really good stuff that Angus puts out from Advisor Ratings, but give or take, you've got 16,000 advisors in the country. Around 13,000 are qualified for risk advice. But we know there's 10,000 advisors that last year did not write a lick of risk insurance business.
Yeah.
Now, yes, some of them are referring, but a whole heap are doing nothing about it.
Exactly.
Then you've got 5,000, give or take, advisors who wrote 1 or 2 cases last year. So, yeah, there's not many specialists, and growing dramatically is a big ask. But I think for each of those groups, there is massive opportunity. So if we can help easier fulfillment for 10 or referral processes, we can bring efficiencies in for the other groups. I think there's a massive opportunity. But, there's got to be some BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals going on to be able to do that.
I love it, and that'd be great if we had triple. All right, next metric in 5 years' time. What are our advisor numbers? Let's say it's 15,000. It's a bit over that. Yeah. What are we at in 5 years' time?
I don't think we'll see much more in those numbers. I just think we'll see more efficiency and better delivery.
Okay, so same number of advisors.
22,000.
Wait, you reckon 22,000? What do you mean not much more? You've just given us 50% more in 5 years.
Yeah, but it's a fair time, isn't it? And I think you look and you go, well, what were we? We were probably 28 5 years ago or something. So that we can have those numbers. And yes, a lot of people have just left, and you've got to bring a lot of new people in. But if we can make it attractive enough,
I would take the other side of that bet. I don't think we're going to be more than 17,000.
Yeah.
So lucky we've recorded this, and
we'll check it back,
and we'll check it back. Yeah. Now the last metric I think is really interesting to hear your take on: the level of personal advice versus general advice versus insurer direct.
Yeah.
And also versus like third party direct. So we've got like the health funds do direct, but they sell like a tower policy or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think the breakdown is in 5 years' time?
Well, it'd be nice if we actually had a bit of implementation of regulatory change, but the things that are being spoken of, are we going to see anything in the next year or two? I'm not sure. I think some of those changes are going to have a fair impact, because from general advice perspective, that could have a significant and direct impact depending on what goes on over the next year or so. I think there's absolutely, to kind of support the story of that either interoperability or the variability of journey and being able to satisfy a customer and a client in different ways along the journey. Those different types of advice are all valuable. And so you might be able to or want to jump between these types of advice as well as the self-directed. Now, I think the personal advice is going to continue to be the core. I think, yes, we saw a lot of backwards movement around direct over the last number of years. Royal Commission, certainly there was a hit there. A lot of the impact on, say, funeral cover was sort of felt across standard direct cover. And it's quite unfortunate, because the fact is there should be more availability, capability for direct business. There's people that just want to go, hey, I need a bit of cover. I just want to be able to look after myself. I want it pretty simple. I don't mind if I pay a little bit more and I ask less questions. Yep, rock and roll. So then you go, okay, what about general and personal advice? Well, general advice is solving a problem that shouldn't be there. If we can fix those problems, then maybe they do become more of the same in the next year or two. Because principally, the challenges that are being delivered in the journey are equal for general advice and personal advice, around underwriting processes and just helping to get people covered, pre-assessments, all those things that are core challenges in the process still exist regardless of your advice type. All we're largely talking about is, do I know your numbers, or am I allowed to know your numbers? And do I have to give you a piece of paper and tell you some other stuff? So you kind of go, that issue or that conflict shouldn't be there in the first place. We should be able to deliver to what a customer's after.
I like, and I think that way of framing general advice is solving a problem that shouldn't be there is really kind of the crux of whether anyone sits. And I've been pretty vocal against general advice, but I think the distilling of it isn't it's unfair or they shouldn't get paid as much as we do or whatever that hoo-ha is. It's more about kind of what you said, that we are solving general advice is by far solving a problem, and I have no doubt that is, but it shouldn't be there. And my fear is it is creating a bigger problem. But The reason why I ask you those questions is because I do like to hear people who think about the future of advice and the future of this business and where they think we're going. So let's pivot back to like digital transformation stuff. So, you've been leaning a lot into this space. You're doing quite a bit. How do you think advice firms should think about the balancing of like, how do we still make our advice really efficient but still human-centered?
Yeah, so I'm doing a fair bit with a number of practices directly. I obviously love my AI, like so many do today. A lot of people are falling over themselves with AI and probably getting more caught up than finding progress. And so it's good to actually help people with progress. I think that actually helps some of the other developments along the way. I'm a simple kind of guy. That's why when I look at, say, these surveys which pinpoint some significant problems in the process, you can go, well, let's just try and knock off a couple of those problems. Over time, if we're going to solve several problems in the process, then we'll kind of click them together as we go. Do a little bit of Lego. Because trying to solve everything, there's too much to do. And so I've kind of pinpointed a few areas. And an example is needs calculations, right? Fairly simple, you'd think. It's something that isn't far different than when I was advisor 100 years ago. It was pretty much the same as what you do today. How much is your mortgage? You want to pay it out or not? If something happens to you, how much do you want to keep going? How much do you need for the kids? What sort of schooling do you want? These questions and answers haven't changed, but we haven't improved the ease of having the client conversation. Software's come and gone, and so then on its own, one of the surveys I did, it was something like 40% of advisors still using Excel for needs calcs. And you're not going to sit in front of a client with an Excel that looks like crap. And so that's one of the things I've done, is to say, well, let me figure out something that solves the challenge for the majority that most people would be pretty happy with, develop the tool. I'm just in the process of making that more broadly available. So I've actually had that tool as in beta for a while because I want to make sure that it was keeping people happy. And so that's one where you'd go, okay, that's just a tool and it sounds pretty simple. It's just an overdone spreadsheet. Yeah, pretty much it is. But what that does is say, well, actually I can make it a bit easier to get this populated before a client convo. I can have a client conversation and actually engage, not be too concerned with crappy tools. I look a little bit more professional because I'm not just using some table in a spreadsheet. And then some more professional output. So just that, you might go, it sounds pretty simple, but that can solve and save time in one part of the process for a whole bunch of advisors. So that's kind of an approach I've taken, is to say, all right, I'm going to hit on several of those pieces. Like pre-assessments is another one. There's a few along the way where you go, it's the bane of people's life. What can I do personally? Can I help make a difference? And if I can, then I'm giving it a go. I'm experimenting like crazy.
For anyone listening who is thinking about, hey, I've got problems in my business, I need to solve them, I want to use technology.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think advisors should be doing today to help kind of drive them towards the future that we see?
Well, the first thing is think about safety and security. I know that the compliance and regulatory position we're in is frightening beyond belief. But some of what's available today isn't helping it. Stepping into AI and not being aware of what you're doing with client data and that protection and being open and transparent. I think at the base of all of this, it's being mindful of that position, that whatever you do is to be mindful of security of client data in the process. That being said, there is an opportunity then to go to, what does my tech stack look like? Where am I really falling down? And I'll say, first of all, most practices don't or haven't spent the time to map out what that journey looks like, time or pain-wise. So one of the best things to do is just to sit down, put some time aside, grab your staff, because you probably don't know all of the process yourself, and just walk through, grab a whiteboard, grab a whole heap of chart paper and work through, what does this actually look like for the client experience? Who's engaging in each of these steps? How long is that actually taking? Because you start to get frightened by the fact that it's actually taking maybe, and this is sort of factual from what I've seen, maybe 10 to 14 hours on average FaceTime for a client onboarding experience. That's excluding underwriting and some other stuff that follows. And that should probably be somewhere between probably 4 and 6, because you're going to see the client a couple of times. whether virtually or physically, you're going to have a little back office support. So that's one of the first things, is to go, well, spend the time actually to map that out. And then you can figure out where to target it. And then you might go, well, maybe there's a couple of solutions that can save me a couple of hours a week. And go get some advice. There's plenty of people out there. You can't do it all, know it all yourself. There's plenty of people around like myself that you can call on to, whether it's on a commercial arrangement or just to get a bit of advice. What's the first step you take is to go outside and get that help. Some of the best practices are making sure they're putting in place an advisory board, so that you're actually getting this help. And you're getting third-party different perspectives on what you're doing.
Yeah, and the way we think about it at Sky, we've done a lot of work in this space, and we keep on spending a heap of time, energy and effort in this space. But the way we've always thought about it for 5 years is not try and boil the ocean. Like we've got 99 problems, and every advice firm does, and doesn't matter how many problems you solve, you'll always have 99 problems. And so you just get more ambitious with your goals and your targets. But I always think about not boiling the ocean. Just pick one thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And let's just solve that. Let's just quickly solve that and move on. And then that solution may be the problem of the future, because that solution wasn't the final one. What I see with people I talk to and engage with, like other advisors, is it's like, AI is going to help solve every problem of mine. And we actually don't use any AI in my business. We've done a lot of automation, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I talk to a lot of people who go, where does automation stop and AI begin? Because really AI is a fancy term, but if we can get a machine to do if this then that, and it does it, and it does it well, that's what AI needs to be doing anyway. And we really want to combine AI to only do that almost. So we've had these tools available for many, many, many years, even well before ChatGPT came, to do a lot of the things that we're doing. But to be honest, the reason why we don't utilize AI very well is because of this. The first thing you said is safety and security. So touching on that, like many advisors are cautious, like we are, thinking about privacy, compliance. What would you say to them of how do they first start working through what they need to do to make sure that ASIC aren't coming and knocking on the door and saying, hey, all your clients' data's been breached?
Yeah. I mean, one of the first things just generally around privacy is to make sure that, and you talk, this has comes to like websites and any of your other tech, is to try and be a little bit harder to break through the door than the next person, so that there's a little less likelihood that you're the one that's targeted. Now, you can't avoid that, but there are a number of steps that you can take. And if you're going to use a few platforms outside of the norm and you haven't done your research on their approach to security and something goes wrong, that's when you're going to have ASIC going, well, what sort of due diligence did you do? So I think, first of all, that due diligence is a key piece, is to go, well, if you're going to use these platforms, what have you done to check where their data's held? Is it in Australia? Are we going to cause some concerns if it's outside? And it doesn't always have to be inside Australia. But if you haven't done your due diligence and to see what that looks like, what sort of protections are around, that's the first step. Because then at least you can show, well, things do go wrong. Things get broken. Systems get hacked. Telstra gets hacked. Optus gets hacked. Qantas, all these people, right? They all have issues, but that doesn't mean you don't deal with them. But you take your own personal responsibility for making sure passwords are right, making sure you're using two-factor when you can. And so it's really just due diligence on platforms you're using. If you can stay behind a secure curtain, where like a lot of people using Microsoft Copilot, that's, you might love or hate it, but you'll go, I'm already in the Microsoft world. So working within that environment, I'm not introducing something else. That's not to say that something else isn't still good, but when you're looking at something else, you want to then be doing that due diligence and making sure. And these platforms, if they're sensible, they have that information readily available. They're not going to shy away from that information.
No, everyone's. I mean, we did our own due diligence on all of our platforms and our own cyber audits and all this. It's actually pretty easy. If an idiot like me can do it, anyone can do it.
Yeah, they all know now what's required, and they make it available. So it shouldn't actually be that hard, but you just got to take the steps and then record it. So it's clear that you've at least made best efforts, to be safe.
Awesome. Well, I think we're going to wrap up this conversation. I think this has been really helpful. But given that you've been around advice, risk for a long time, you're obviously really passionate about it. So, and you predicted that we're going to 3x the growth in 5 years. The amount of premiums being written, every insurance executive is going to love you. Love hearing that idea. But what do you wish more advisors understood about the value of risk advice that maybe you don't feel like they do?
There's something to be said around those case studies and real stories. So the more that we can do around that sharing and people actually getting it, just enough people don't get that value. And so I'd probably give you that in double barrel. Number one is actually getting to appreciate the value of a claim, the value of insurance and what it does. And the double barrel to that is most people are dealing with referral sources and with centers of influence. So how well are you helping them to appreciate what it means? Because at the end of the day, most business is going to come in from COIs. And that's where a lot of my focus happens to be, is what's the job you're doing to help engage, to help educate and help your COIs understand the value of risk, because that's where the growth is going to help the growth come from.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, as you say that, I think about we've had a lot of claims and we're helping a lot of clients, but every year we produce our numbers, how we've done with every insurer and our claims and stuff, and we produced it, I think 2 or 3 years ago. Our book of clients was fairly new to insurance, and we talked about our claims. It's like $1 million of claims in the year. It wasn't that much, but we wrote $3 million worth of premiums. And I remember an advisor on LinkedIn had a go at me because the premiums that we set up was more than the claims that we helped, helped our clients with. And I was just thinking to myself, like, insurance is super valuable for the ones that need it and the ones that make a claim. And we as an advice firm who specialize in it, we see this now and I believe in it more than I ever have. And I feel like I'm an old school risky now that, talking about the value because of claims, because when I was younger and I didn't see the claims, you kind of think, oh, well, that's a good way to justify yourself to continue to earn those commissions because it's a good business and it's profitable. Now, next minute, risk advice isn't as profitable as it used to be, but I was that skeptical advisor, and now I'm getting comments from these other skeptical advisors thinking, well, hold on, the numbers don't make sense. And I'm thinking to myself, well, literally, we had a week where we paid out $1.5 million worth of claims, well over and above any premiums we set up for that week. Love to say it matched the premiums we set up that week, but we're not that successful yet. And it's true, just being able to see those claims. So even if you don't do risk actively or you dabble in it, speak to advice firms who have clients who've gone through the claims. Just have a chat with them. Hey, what claims have you done in the last 5 years? What's impacted you the most? Because we have claims all the time. We've got a claims manager at Sky now, and it helps you believe in advice so much more, and it helps you believe in insurance when you start seeing these clients going through these claims experience. So I think that's a great call out.
A lot easier to talk to someone about trauma when you appreciate and you're aware of how someone used trauma, proceeds, knowing those real cases, knowing what it actually means in the real world, rather than just being a pure number. For sure. And
even risk specialists, like even in our conversations with each other, we talk a lot about premium rewrites and all of these things. And sure, there are a lot of legitimate frustrations people can have, but let's talk about insurance companies paying out these claims. Like, they're doing a great job. Yes, they're contractually obligated to pay out these claims, and so we don't feel like we need to give them a pat on the back, but that's what we help our clients with. So great call out. And before we finish, how does someone reach out and say, hey, Marc Fabris, it sounds like a switched on cat. I want to reach out and get in touch. How do we do that?
Grab me on LinkedIn or head to riskhub.com.au. Not too hard to find me online.
Awesome. Thanks heaps, Marc. Appreciate you taking the time.
Good chatting, mate. Thanks for that.